Good. And it's nice that for the 50 people that are left, we do have people in the very far corners of the room. Okay, so my name's Sterling Crockett. The name of my talk is Making Fast Sites Faster in SharePoint 2013. I have to tell you, did anybody see Bon Jovi last night? Anybody? Yes, I went. I want you to know I didn't sing along, I didn't squeal or anything like that because my voice is fragile. And I want you to know that I did that for you. So I hope you can feel the love. I love SharePoint, and more than anything, I love fast pages because, and John, my friend John will appreciate this. Slow pages give SharePoint a bad name. Okay, let's get to the meat of this. I've been a SharePoint developer for 10 years with Microsoft. I started in the ECM team, so I've done a lot of that, but since then I've spent most of my time in performance. I've had my fingers in all different kinds of performance, server, network, browser, what have you. The stuff that I personally find the most compelling is the stuff that users feel, right, which has to do with the network and the browser more than anything. And so the last release, I've spent all of my time on that. And so today we're going to talk about some things, and I hope there will be some stuff that you find compelling, and if not, we should talk afterwards. So my personal motto is that perceived performance is achieved performance. And this is the thing that I try and evangelize to my peers and virtually anyone that works on performance. And the reason I feel this way is that for all intents and purposes, if a user has an experience and it feels fast, even though as a developer you kind of know that it wasn't, if it feels fast to the user, you still get full credit. And there are a lot of things that you can do to make things feel fast or delay certain types of processing that will make your pages particularly feel faster. On the server, it's hard to do, right? If pages take 200 milliseconds to render on the server and you can do it in 100 milliseconds, that's a towering achievement that doubles your throughput. But most users aren't going to sense a 1/10 of a second difference. Whereas on the network and in the browser, there are big things you can do. So we're going to talk about 3 different features in SharePoint 2013. First is Script on Demand, which is technically a 2010 feature, but I haven't seen it in all that prevalent of use when I've talked to customers. And it's so powerful that everyone should just be aware of it. So we're going to touch on that. Second of all, we'll talk about the new content delivery network framework that we built into SharePoint. I need to say right now that that's not available on-prem, only in SharePoint Online, but we'll talk about that aspect of it in a little bit. And finally, we'll talk about the minimal download strategy, which I think of as smooth page transitions, but which almost universally goes by its acronym, MDS. If you've ever heard of MDS, would you please raise your hand? I'm just interested to see who has heard of this. Okay, about half. Great. So let's get started. Oh, okay. So now that we got rid of all the IT pro people, we're going to have like a little bit of a quiz because there's going to be code today, and I'm going to show examples of good and bad code. And I don't really expect people to know the answers to all these quiz questions, but these are all based on bugs that I've personally found and fixed in SharePoint, right? So at least some SharePoint dev made the mistake at one point, and maybe you have, or maybe you have a friend that has made some of these mistakes, and you'll know what to do about it. So we'll start with a warm-up problem, which is server-based, and then we'll jump into some client and browser stuff. So what's the difference in SQL utilization? Let's say you have in hand, I say in hand, you have an instantiated SP web object. I probably already lost 90% of you. But let's say you have this SP web object in hand, and you need to get a list, right? A specific list. Like, which of these ways is more efficient? I know my friend here in the front does. Yeah, go ahead. What is it? You with the, you. The second one is much better, right? Way better. And like I said, you don't have to know the answers, but I got some specific numbers here. The second one's better because it sort of surgically requests just the one list, right? As opposed to grabbing the entire array of lists in the web, which is what the first example does. So you can see that they both require a single SQL round trip, but the first one is worse by a factor of 30. Right? When we're talking about throughput, that's huge. There's a bonus reason to use the second one, which is that users that don't have the right permissions can't even access the entire array of lists. Right? So if that code running that first line, if the user running that first line doesn't have rights to get the entire array of lists, they won't even get the list that they need. So there are a bunch of reasons that second line is better. The main reason I bring this up, even though it's not related to browser or network performance, is that I just want to underscore, if you have a new developer whose plan is to sort of IntelliSense his or her way to SharePoint development success, it is really, really easy to make mistakes that look small but have a huge performance footprint. Okay? And I'm going to be highlighting experience. I see you laughing over here. You know. You've seen it. And I've seen it a lot too. So we're going to highlight some examples like that. So the first feature is what we call script on demand. Raise your hand if you've ever heard of script on demand. Okay, good. Again, it looks like 30, 40%. Most people in the crowd, I assume, are people that care about making their sites fast. So since this is a 2010 feature, let's go straight to the perf problem. So which of these two examples, and by how much, is it better? So the scenario is, and let me describe the scenario in a little bit of detail. You've got a web page, and you're going to add a widget, or like some sort of a control on the right side, and it's got a button. And if somebody pushes that button, then this script file, sp.js, has to have executed. Okay? For that script to run. But otherwise, you don't need that script in order to show the main page content. So this file, sp.js, is 100 kilobits on the wire. They've got a 1 megabit connection. So what's the actual performance, the time difference for the user if you register that script in the standard way or on demand? Nobody has to answer that. There are two pieces of insight that I want to impart here. Number one, sp.js, it turns out, depends on 3 other files. I don't remember exactly which ones they are, but when you bring them all together in aggregate, it's no longer 100K on the wire. It's 200, right? So sp.js has what I call an entourage of files. And the number of times I saw a dev register just sp.js, not knowing that it was going to double in size, was huge. So that's point number one, is it's 2 seconds to download all of those scripts. Point number two, any script that's been registered in the standard way has to be downloaded and executed before the user will see anything. If it's registered on demand, those scripts can be downloaded and executed later when the user doesn't care, right? When they're already looking at the content on their page. The point being that script on demand allows you to execute scripts later. Scripts that aren't necessary for the UI, you can execute them later. And for anybody that is thinking about trying this at home, I totally recommend it. So I'll show you what it looks like. Here's how it works, and it's very simple, right? Like in a typical HTML page rendered by SharePoint, the head is where we put all the scripts, right? So it looks like this. If you've ever looked at SharePoint HTML in the head, you've seen something that looks almost exactly like this. You can see I have a standard script registration there for sp.js at the bottom. If you do an on-demand registration, it looks like that. So there's still a script tag there. There's still something that has to be executed, but all that does is really kind of create a placeholder, right, a pointer, so that when some script later knows that it needs sp.js, it knows where to find it. In this model, it has to be executed at the moment the browser finds it. This is seems like a good time to explain this. The HTML spec, as it comes out from the W3C, states that when a script tag is encountered in HTML, it has to be basically executed right then. Right? You can't do the rest of the page. You have to do that thing first, because I guess technically it can change the rest of the page. But it has to execute first. And so these scripts at the top will all block rendering. This line here will also block rendering, but it's so trivially fast that it doesn't matter. OK, so to review, instead of putting a standard script element, a script, script src equals at the top of the page, you end up with a reference to the URL. And then that little widget that I described earlier, it can go download and execute that script when it needs it. Now, we're also sensitive to the fact that you don't want that button to take 2 seconds, right? You don't want users to have a good experience loading the page and a bad experience clicking the button, right? There are ways around that too that we've done in SharePoint. But the common case really is, stuff that you only need for specific scenarios, delay it. In general, I'm going to take questions later. You have something to clarify? How does it know when the script has been loaded? Okay, basically, very quickly, this register SOD, it maintains an array of all the scripts. So in the array, you'll see this sp.js with an accompanying sort of state. And the first state is, basically registered, right? And then after that, when some script requests it, then that state will update to be either loading or loaded or in progress. That's how we know. Okay. What happens is somebody will write a line of code, and I have this in the appendix for anybody that's going to try it. There'll be a line of code that says, I want sp.js, I want this function from it, please get it now, right? And so it will load it. It will create a script element and attach that dynamically to the DOM. Okay, that's how it works. Great. And I can't underscore enough what a huge, huge, huge performance win this is at low bandwidth. It's even a win at high bandwidth, which I can show you in just a minute. But at low bandwidth, it makes such a difference that this isn't a best practice for SharePoint core development. This is actually a required practice. You're not actually, in SharePoint, allowed to do a standard registration without getting buy-off from me and a couple of other mean guys on the SharePoint team. So very quickly here, let me show you the difference between SOD, which is what we call script on demand, and non-SOD. Here we go. So this here is a page being loaded. I'm going to load these pages a couple times because the network is, goes on and off. And if my goal is to put on a slow network demo, that's been pretty easy for the last couple days. That's not the entire goal. Okay, so this page has script on demand, and I've done some things to make it slower than usual. But you can see that in this case, right, you're seeing something. You're not seeing all the images yet. Like all the scripts aren't downloaded and executed yet, but you're seeing something. This is a page that uses script on demand. And the wheel spins while it's doing other stuff in the page. Okay, this is the non-script on demand page. Okay, there it is. So in this case, like all those scripts that the user might someday need, they all had to wait. They all had to be executed and downloaded before you could do anything else. And why would you put your users through that? We don't, by the way. We do not ship that way. I should have stopped when I was ahead. Yeah, if my network's like this, you're going to love the other demo. There you go. So in general, it's faster. The principle is download the scripts when you need them. I think you get it. All right. Go back to my slides. Okay. All right. So feature number 2, the content delivery network. As I stated, right now we can only do this on SharePoint Online. I will mention that as I came out to this conference, we had people on the ground in Redmond actually testing to see if we can do this on-prem. So know that we take that very seriously as I'm talking through this, and we certainly aspire to make it available on-prem. So raise your hand if you're familiar with the concept of a CDN, or content delivery network. Okay, most, not quite. Very briefly, the principle behind a CDN is that if I'm looking at a web page and if I have to request a web page, the further away from me the server is that has the content, the longer it takes to download. That sounds really obvious, and it kind of is, but there are some intricacies that make it kind of less obvious than it really is. The further away it is, the longer it takes to download the content. The principle of CDN is if there's some stuff that you can put closer to the user, then they can download that faster. So if you think about SharePoint, like in SharePoint we have some very special content, right? Special, like sort of it's rights protected, and not everybody's supposed to be able to see it, and we want to be careful of that. That all has to stay on the farm. But there's other content, like the massive number of scripts that we have, and that's all anonymously available, and there's no reason not to put that on a cache network, like a CDN. So this is a sample network profile of the type I spend more hours than I can even count looking at. So the idea here is that this is basically a timeline, in this case from 0 to 3 seconds, for anyone that hasn't seen one. It shows you what's being downloaded or accessed or requested on a given port at any given moment in time. So I'm going to go through this. This is a real SharePoint page actually on the internet using a CDN. The first thing is that's the initial page request, like www.sharepoint.com or whatever main page it is that you're getting. Now, if you look very carefully, and I don't have a good way to show you this, but at about 0.5 seconds, there's a little blue box inside there. Okay, that little blue box, are people seeing that little blue box there? Okay, good. Nodding heads. Awesome. That little blue box is the first packet of real content that comes back from the server. It's like the top part of the HTML source. And when that thing comes down, the browser immediately interprets it and knows right away what scripts and what styles and what images have to be downloaded in order to render and for the page to function correctly. So that's what happens next. You can see that this batch of files, which is about 11 ports or so, starts getting downloaded at exactly 5.5 seconds when the browser knew what it needed. Now you can see that some of those files take longer to download than others. The first one I want to point out is these ones, these really small files. Well, they're not actually smaller. In fact, those files are all bigger. Those are the biggest files that we're downloading. But because they're coming from the CDN, you can see that the little blue boxes in there, the density of those is very high, right? And so we're able to download those much more quickly. I'd like to bring your attention now to the blue section at the bottom. What that indicates is the bandwidth utilization over time of this page load. And you can see that while we're using the CDN, we're getting a full, just packed fire hose pipe at 6 megabits per second. Awesome, great, for about half a second. Then we move into what I call the bandwidth vacuum, where we download nothing for a while these ports are opening. And you can see that even once we start downloading these other files that have to come from the farm, it takes a lot longer. You can see how they tend to download sort of in lockstep, right? The requests are made for the packets, and then the packets all come back at the same time, and then all the ports request again. That's inefficient. And before we go to the perf quiz, I'd like to point out that we are well aware of these being the long pole now. Before we implemented the feature, they weren't. And all these scripts that look like they're downloading in absolutely no time, like those all were being pushed onto the end. So we are faster. We obviously know how to make it even faster now. So let's go to perf quiz problem number 2. So you've got a file. It's 100 kilobytes. You've got to add it to your page load. Now we're using a 6 megabit per second connection. You can tell I love math because I love all the numbers involved here. That's why I do performance. So what's the difference in page load time if you register a script using just the name of the script, and this is in layouts, in the layouts directory, just the name of the script versus the actual absolute URL? So first of all, you might ask yourself why anybody would register the absolute URL of a script, and I would say absolutely you should not. At least in SharePoint you should not, but I've seen it. So if it can happen with us, maybe it happens with you, like I said, maybe with one of your friends. The difference is big. And the big difference is if you register using an absolute URL to the host farm, it takes an extra 500 milliseconds. In a page that was taking about 1.5 seconds to get to content where people can see it, why extend that by 30%? Whereas, if you register it as a file that can be downloaded from the CDN, which you should always do, it comes down basically for free, because farm server content is the long pole. So to go back to that image, you can see we have that big bandwidth section there that we could be using but aren't. Well, that's where you could be downloading your extra file. Simple. OK, so what's the point? When is CDN useful for you? When is it not useful for you? So the example on the right now is the 6 megabit CDN-enabled example we've been talking about. And the one on the left is a 1 megabit scenario, kind of the one that we use for script on demand. So you can see in that 1 megabit scenario, the bandwidth, the pipe, is already full. Like the goal of a CDN is to help you use more of your bandwidth, right? Because the distance from the server is what dilutes your ability to use bandwidth. And so if your bandwidth is already full, the CDN doesn't actually help you all that much. If we think about how TCP itself works, right? Like in this case, it's a 125 millisecond round trip from me to the server. And 125 milliseconds might not sound like that much, but it's actually huge, right? It's a long way. So while we've got 6 ports, while any 5 ports are busy making a request, one of those ports is taking 25 to 30 milliseconds to actually download stuff, which means that at any given moment, you can see sort of a stair-step pattern there, can't you? Right? At any given moment, some port is downloading something. And that's why the CDN doesn't help you in the 1 megabit case. So to review, the further you are from your server, the less able you are to utilize bandwidth. And high bandwidth becomes almost useless if there's a huge distance. We actually saw some customers in Brazil, right? Customers in Brazil who were 400 milliseconds away from the server, and they, at even as little as 2 megabits, were not getting a full pipe. That was pretty painful. But at low bandwidth, it almost doesn't matter. When we did some testing in SharePoint, we saw that at, we used a particularly heavy page. At 1 megabit, you can see that the difference between the CDN loaded page and the normal page is almost nothing. It was about 200 milliseconds out of 7.8 seconds. It almost doesn't matter. And yet at the high bandwidth, not only is the difference, the absolute difference, bigger at 1.3 seconds, but it's also, a huger percentage, right? Your pages are half as fast for people that have high bandwidth. So what we do in SharePoint to make use, here's how we use the CDN in SharePoint. We start with the script link. So the script link control, raise your hand if you've ever heard of the script link control. That's not nearly enough hands. And if you walk out of here and you say, I didn't learn anything from Sterling Crockett except he told me about this thing called the script link, like, great, okay? Learn about this control. And the reason is this. We in SharePoint get that our pages, the thing that slows our pages down is the execution of scripts and the downloading of scripts, because there's so much of it, right? So we know that, and we work on it. And a vast majority of our work to make that better goes into this script link. So if you're using that in the right way, you're getting all the goodness we're trying to build in for you. You're getting that for free. So the way the script link works is on a server-side code, you can register a script, a URL, and that URL will end up in an array of URLs that when the page itself renders, will all get rendered into the head. I think I have that here. Yeah, so it's this thing that I was showing you earlier. The script link rendered out all of these scripts, right? Because it knew what they all were, put them all in the same place in sort of the efficient way. If the CDN is enabled, what it will do is instead of rendering a server relative link, it will just make that link be straight to the CDN, right? Because you have one CDN for the farm, right? It's very easy to just prepend that thing, right? Simple, super easy. And we will do that for you for any file that's in layouts if you use the script link and if you have CDN enabled. And finally, one other thing I should point out, the design of this framework is such that if the CDN, if the edge, the cache server doesn't have the file, right? Because now people will be going to another server requesting that file. If that server doesn't have it, it will simply go, it needs to be configured to go back to your home server to get that file. And then it just has it in perpetuity or for a while. So we talked about how CDN helps you if you have high bandwidth customers. It doesn't help you if you have low bandwidth customers. Another reason it can help you is if you just have a whole lot of scripts and a lot of richness, right? It's that same bandwidth vacuum again. So we had a case in SharePoint over the course of the release in the performance group. What we do is we watch various types of page loads, right? Like we got, I don't know how many pages, 20. Let's say we have 20 different pages that we watch to see how long it takes to download those pages over a 1 megabit connection, a 6 megabit connection. We watch all this stuff. And we had two different scenarios where one was sort of the base case and one had a lot more richness on it, a lot more sort of stuff on it, and a lot of extra scripts. Well, the richer one was taking about 1.5 seconds longer to render consistently because of all that extra script. Well, as soon as we enabled the CDN, and this absolutely thrilled me when it happened. Can't talk about it enough. As soon as we enabled the CDN, like all of those extra scripts packed themselves into that free bandwidth, and the pages became almost the same. That was awesome. So the more richness you have, the more scripts, the more the CDN helps you. In our case, it really helped a lot. So there are some limitations based on the long polls you saw on my trace. We can't serve CSS right now. We can't serve images. I could give you a detailed reason for that, but I won't. If you want to, you can talk about it later. We understand that it would be great to download that stuff. For SharePoint 2013, we simply had to scope ourselves to scripts, which anybody that is intimately familiar with problem knows is still like 80 to 90% of the problem. And we had to just accept that. So if you want to write code that works, just use the script link. You can do it. You can do a standard registration. You can do it on demand. It just works. You can do this with any file that's in. And by the way, I see somebody taking pictures, but you're welcome to download this deck. And I also have code samples for script on demand in the appendix. This works right now only for scripts that are in layouts. You can't register absolute URLs because the script link will just give you that URL. And then there's another sort of a technicality. You should never use XML HTTP request to load registered scripts that have been registered with the script link. There's a complicated reason for that, and we have worked to get around it and have gotten around it in some ways, but there's browser-dependent code. And anyway, if you know the problem, you know why I'm saying it. Okay, so for now, we only have this on SPO. Like I said, we totally aspire to put this on-prem. We've had customers come to us. They say they want it on-prem. We know you want it. If you're interested, please, by all means, let us know so we'll know our customers really want this, and we already know that. In the meantime, just write good code. Right? You can always do that. We don't do it nearly as often as we should, right? But write good code. Write it according to the standards that I enumerated in the previous slide. And when you can have CDN, you'll be ready for it. And it helps you for other reasons as well. All right, minimal download strategy. I kind of feel like this is the one that I was all excited about talking about anyway. All right, so the goal of MDS, stated very simply, was to make our pages transition smoothly from one to another. Right? People use SharePoint, they go from page to page. What could we do to make that smoother? So I have a demo, and the truth is you've already kind of seen this demo, and I'm going to try and demo it in a way that highlights some of the differences. Here we go. All right, so this is my MDS demo site. I have to reload this page, and then I'm going to have to log in. So for the script on demand demo, to make it more, I had to load it from Singapore, right, because we wanted to make the downloading of scripts be a little more painful. Because I know when you come to SharePoint conference, pain is what you want. Scroc SPX on Microsoft. Because I'm a nervous presenter, I always worry that I'm going to forget my password or something. I think I got it. Awesome. Okay, so this is the SharePoint that you have come to know and love for so many years. Click around through a few pages here. Right, it's not all that slow. Little flicker. No big deal. Site pages. Our network latency, our network performance is, up and down. So, okay, so nothing strange here. This is the SharePoint that you've used for years and years and years. It doesn't seem at all weird. At least it doesn't seem weird to me. So now I'm going to turn on MDS. And by the way, MDS is active by default. I just turned it off for the sake of the demo. All right, here we go. There we go. Ooh. You like that? I just love that. There's nothing gets me going like a fast rendering page. And the cool thing is you can do almost. You can switch from page to page. You can do site settings. You can change. Let's change the name here. Right, it smoothly moved to that page. Smoothly backed out. Right, awesome. What if I wanted to make a new page? Right. Let's see, test page. It takes too long. Now, I want to point out that this page is actually not in MDS mode. This page rendered in the standard mode because the scripts and everything are doing some special stuff, and this page just knows that it can't handle it. So where it needed to gracefully back out, it could. Put some content there. Save. And this page right now is rendering not in MDS mode, but as soon as I click something else, it'll flip back into MDS mode. And it's fast. So that is how it works. Now, in case you forgot, now the other problem that we've discovered is that once you start using this, it starts to feel normal very quickly. Right? Like, hey, yeah, you made my page render in half the time. What have you done for me lately? Right? Well, let me show you. Let me go back to what it used to be like. Right? Boo, white flickers. No, get it away. Right? It's not that terrible, right? We try to make everything fast, but it's faster with MDS. Okay. And by the way, sorry I don't have a huge slew of demos. By definition, right? My job is making pages render faster. So by definition, my demos should be short and as short as possible, right? Okay. So why did we do it? Right? So anyone that's used SharePoint knows why we tried to make the pages faster. But why do we do it this way? So at the end of SharePoint 2010, a bunch of us sat down in a room several times. And this was a group of us that had worked on making 2010 faster, and we asked ourselves, what could we do to make it faster than we already have? Because at the end of 2010, we got to the point where we're making sort of incremental changes, and we're slicing off a little script here, and maybe eliminating some CSS classes here, and there's nothing you could do to sort of jump to the next big thing. And so we knew that we were going to have to try something a little bit bold. So when we evaluated SharePoint, we said, well, across SharePoint, any given set of pages, the vast majority of the scripts and the styles and the HTML is all the same. You got this huge array of scripts, and you've got to render those scripts every single time you load the page. And you've got to apply those CSS styles every single time you load the page. Why are we doing that? This here is an example of a profile we had, another timeline that showed JavaScript interactions with the DOM. Now, this page goes from about 0 to 2.5 seconds, and you can see there's a bar there. Let's see if I can click here. A bar there, which is about 1.3 seconds. It goes from 1.2 to 2.5, right? 1.3 seconds of script execution every single time I load a page, right? I don't know about you. I wanted my 1.3 seconds back. A human life is only 2.3 billion seconds long. Might as well get my 1.3 back where I can. So we said, what can we do? So the basic premise behind MDS was this. When a user goes from one page to another, what is it that they really want to see? Right? Do you want to see everything? Because if you look at these two, kind of a lot of it's the same. You got the same little top stories over there. You got the sort of the ads on the top and on the side. User doesn't care about any of that. User, who's looking at the page on the left, wants to go to the page on the right, and all they really want to see is that. So we said, well, what if we could do that? Now, it's slightly more complicated, right? You can't just update the main page content, because there's other stuff on the page that could also change. Like, for example, you've got breadcrumbs, you've got the quick launch, the search box. Like, these are all things that might change from page to page, and if they can change, you have to account for the fact that they will. Okay, so we're going to kind of simulate an MDS page load here so you understand exactly how this works. In SharePoint, we make profuse uses of master page, right? Hopefully you all are generally familiar with the concept of a master page. I'm not even going to ask. But the basic idea behind a master page is you've got this part of the page represented by the gray part here. This part of the page is by and large static. And it doesn't change. It sort of defines the shape of your page, every page in your site, the stuff, the sort of look and feel that you want your users to experience. Then there are these big holes in the page that you have to fill in with dynamic content, right? This is all the content placeholder model in master pages. So when you load an MDS page, it's a two-request process. The first request is what I call the master page wireframe. So your first request just looks like this. In fact, you might not see almost anything at all. You may see almost nothing. But it has the shape of the page. It has some HTML. It's in there. It also, very importantly, has all the scripts and styles that are on every page in your site. So this thing comes down. It's lightweight. It's quick. And then it knows what page the user was actually trying to look at, and it downloads just that content. See how we filled in those 4 boxes nice and smoothly there? The animation is an effect of PowerPoint, but actually we have animation in MDS as well. So the user can finally look at their article, whatever it was they wanted to see. Now when they click a link and they want to see something else, then we get, again, just the content. Let me show you that again. We already looked at it, for real. But you can see that a couple of things don't change, right? Like the ad on the left didn't change. The search box didn't change. That's OK. They might change, and we have to err on the side of caution in this. But for every page load, we download the stuff that's in those white boxes. OK. So to review, think of an MDS page load as this. 2 page requests. The first one is the wireframe, the master page wireframe. The second one is the content that's just inside there. Okay? Then when a user transitions from one page to another, if the master pages match, and MDS keeps track of this, if the page you're on has the same master page as the page that you're going to, then it will try and send you only the content. If the master pages don't match, then you kind of have to start over obviously because of the model that we use here. But where possible, we respond with just the stuff that you need. OK, so how does it work at an even lower technical level? I'm really into the dev part of this. So can't we just take the HTML, find the div on the page, and just slam it in there? Dot inner HTML equals, right? Like that was what we tried first. It turns out it's not quite that easy, and it's not even almost that easy. And as any SharePoint developer will tell you, this was hard to do, right? And this is only one of the many reasons that was the case. So let's go back to that example where the user just wants to see the content on that next page. Well, there are some subtleties here. Like the page that they're going to has that chart. Well, that chart might require some scripts, right? Maybe it has a special script so it can be rendered. Or maybe it needs like a special style. So there are some unique things on that second page that we have to account for. We can't just ignore all of that and just slam the HTML in there. In fact, almost every page in SharePoint has some unique combination of all these factors. Script files, inline scripts, style files, inline styles, hidden input fields, you name it, form actions, HTML, event receivers, JavaScript, whatever. There's a ton of stuff, and we have to account for all of that. So the way that it actually works is this. That first page that we load, the master page wireframe, has in it all the script required to run the MDS framework. And when it requests a delta block is what we call it, that big square, that big rectangle, that's what we call a delta block. When it requests a delta block of any kind, whether as a first page or as a transition page, this is what it gets. It gets HTML, of course the HTML that we want to put in the page. It gets an array of scripts, array of styles, all of those sorts of things. In fact, in order to make sure that we're functionally equivalent, it has the entire array of URLs, of script URLs, that would have been put in the page had it been a standard load, right? And it has the entire array of URLs for CSS files that would have been there had it been a standard load. And all those sorts of things, all that information that would have been necessary for a standard load, we bring over in this Delta packet. Then what happens when the framework gets this? Well, of course, the first thing it does is absolutely grab that HTML content and slam it in the div. We do that first. And this is an explicit performance win for MDS. And the reason is, because we know we're doing this, we guarantee, or we restrict, that those HTML blocks we send over the wire cannot have scripts in them. Okay? So an embedded piece of HTML cannot have a script in it. Because it doesn't have a script in it, we know that we're not subject to that HTML spec thing, right, where scripts have to execute first. We can just slap those in, and they go really, really quick. Then we do have to take care of any scripts which would have been in the page. So the MDS framework, which knows what scripts it's already got loaded, looks at the scripts that would have been there for the new page in standard mode, finds the diff. Maybe there's a couple of extra scripts, like to show that chart. It executes only those scripts. And it goes through the same basic process with styles, input fields, and all of those sorts of things. It is not exactly that simple, but if you think of it that way, you're definitely understanding what it is that we do. Okay, this might be my favorite chart in the entire presentation. So this here is a profile of Internet Explorer, basically CPU utilization, when rendering the same page in MDS mode on top and standard mode on the bottom. Okay, it's about a 3-second timeline. So the first and most obvious thing here is that we're executing about half as much script. Right, I wanted my 1.3 seconds back. It looks like I got about 0.7. I'll take it. Right? But in MDS mode, there's all those extra scripts you don't have to execute again. You already executed them the first time. Why are we forcing you to do it again? But the more subtle and the better win, in my opinion, is this one right here, where the UI update happens. In the MDS mode, the UI update happens at about a second, because we don't have to execute all those scripts first. In the standard mode, it happens at about 2 seconds. Okay, that's big. That's 50%. I'll take that. Okay, so if you want to write code that works in MDS mode, there are some standards to which you must adhere. The first one, I know I'm a broken record talking about the script link. Just use it. It works in MDS. It works with CDNs. It works with script on demand. Just use it. You get all the goodness we want to bestow you with. Register any script file you need in the script link. Any style file you need, register it in the CSS link, which is basically the analog of the script link in the CSS world. Then for other stuff, like inline scripts, inline styles, hidden input fields, use a new class we created called the SP Page Content Manager. Now, for anyone who's ever used Script Manager or Page.Client Script, Register Startup Script, the methods on the SP Page Content Manager are basically the same as on the Script Manager. Right? It's just a mirror of that. And in fact, you can use the Script Manager and be compliant with MDS, but there are things you can do that will cause problems. Right? Like, for example, you can set a parameter so it will put script elements into the page, which we don't want. If you use the SP Page Content Manager, you can do all that same stuff, but we'll just make sure that you avoid any of the pitfalls that you could typically hit. Okay, you also have to update the master page. So you need to specify which are the parts that are dynamic. Right? You find your content placeholders. You can see in this case, there's a content placeholder main. We just bracketed that, put this Ajax Delta container around it. And now the MDS infrastructure knows that when it's rendering a delta of this page, it should send the stuff that's inside there. That's how it knows. If you have inline scripts, you should wrap those with a script block. I know not all of this will seem totally relevant in the room here, but if you try this out at home, you'll see that you need to do these things. And heaven forbid your users ever get an error message on your sites. You can even have your error page work with MDS. You simply have to add an Ajax Delta, which has this Delta placeholder main ID, and it will be the silkiest, smoothest, most pleasantest error experience your users have ever had. They'll almost thank you before they quote-unquote contact the administrator. Okay, if you want to write code that fails, that's also easy to do. And we did a lot of it in SharePoint, and we had to root a ton of this stuff out. So rule number one is you can never, never, never write a script tag directly to the output, like the output of a control. This goes back to what I was saying, where those HTML blocks that we send over, they have to not have any script tags. This is how you make sure that doesn't happen. Second of all, you can't use the page.clientScript.register methods, right? So there's script manager.register startup script, and there's page.clientScript.register startup script. And a lot of them are the same, and at least in SharePoint, people would frequently use them interchangeably in core SharePoint. I know there are good reasons people use page.clientScript in some cases, and it's something we can talk about. But we can't work with that in MDS. So that one is guaranteed to fail. Script Manager might work. Just use the SP Page Content Manager. And then, of course, Ajax Delta controls cannot be nested because each one represents a single sort of cohesive block of stuff. So to reiterate, you can never do this in MDS. Never. You see how I did writer.write alert? That thing will cause MDS to fail and reload the page in standard mode. But instead, just do this. Right? It's just as easy. It's just as simple. And it works in MDS. And that will work in all the other modes too. Right? Like all the extra classes we added to work with MDS, like they all work in the standard mode. And if you turn off MDS, but you're still using our new APIs and stuff, you're totally good. So there's no reason not to do it. Just write good code, right? OK. So we'll finish up now with perf problem number 3. See if you can figure that out. Hopefully, based on the stuff that I just told you, you may be able to figure this out. What's the difference in page load time if you use page.clientScript.register startup script versus Script Manager? And the answer is, if you use the page.clientScript model, the page has to reload. And so we call that about a 2-second hit. So if you use the other one, the Script Manager model or SP Page Content Manager, it's trivially fast to execute that script, and super fast, and you get to use MDS mode, which is what we want you to do. So, hopefully, and this is my SharePoint 2013 conclusion slide, we've tried to put something for everybody, right? Whatever your scenario is, wherever your users are, we've tried to have something that you can use to make things faster for your customers. If you have low bandwidth, use Script on Demand. And actually, you should use it no matter what. But it really helps at low bandwidth. If you have high bandwidth and high latency, then the CDN helps you a lot, right? Because you can make more use of that big bandwidth with the closer servers. And if you find that your biggest performance bottleneck is browser processing time, then MDS helps you with that. And we use all 3 of these everywhere we can. But just wanted to point out that each one of them sort of plays to a different sort of characteristic. So I hope you enjoyed the presentation. If so, please fill out an evaluation. Actually, if not, you can do that too. Other than that, I'm happy to take your questions, and I thank you all for having been here. We have, if you could please use the microphones if you do have questions, so we can get all these questions on the record. Thanks. And we'll start in the middle. Go.
Is there any way to ensure that apps that you're downloading from the catalog adhere to these guidelines?
Sorry, what? Oh, and
custom apps. Like, is there any way to ensure that those custom apps that you're installing or putting on your pages adhere to these guidelines?
Yeah. So right now, I haven't. To my knowledge, there's no way to actually do that. You have to kind of try it. Most stuff, if it's only script-based, we saw John Campbell and actually Jonathan Kern talked about this a little bit. There are script like browser-side guidelines that they have to follow. Like they have to register certain things, and they have to have what's called an init method. And right now, we don't have a way other than actually cracking open their code and looking at it to know if it adheres to the standard or not.
Okay, and then the other question is, if you use this for public internet sites, is this also available, that feature?
Yeah, anybody can use that.
Okay.
That's just everywhere in SharePoint. Okay, go ahead.
I understand that if the master page is the same, MDS works. What if there are differences in the page layouts for publishing pages?
Okay, so first of all, publishing does not support this feature. So if you have a publishing site, they won't do it. There was too much, for them to be able to work with that. If you, for whatever reason, had an internet site, yeah, so I know the publishing model, actually, where you have the layouts inside, that work inside the master page. It would still work with that because it all has to do with where you place those AJAX deltas, right? And the layouts are inside, basically, the content placeholders, and so it's actually a larger scope than that. Okay, we have it over here? Great.
When you said you cannot implement CDN in the new fashion in on-premise implementations?
I'm sorry, I'm having a little trouble.
On the on-premise implementations, when you said you cannot use CDN features the moment, are you talking about the enable CDN and CDN prefix properties of the web application?
It sounds like, I'm not totally understanding your question. It sounds like you're asking about the on-prem thing and CDN, and I'm not sure.
Yes, there are properties in the what I saw in the beta preview. Enable CDN and CDN prefix.
So I still don't totally understand, but what I will say is that you can, technically, it's just out there, right? Like technically the feature is out there. We don't support it for on-prem customers, but it is there. I mean, the API for turning it on exists. Okay. I mean, it's public, but we don't support it right now.
Okay.
If somebody, for whatever reason, was trying it, in their spare time, it could be done. So, okay, go ahead.
Yeah, does enabling MDS affect the processing on the server side, the web front ends?
Does it affect server-side processing?
Yeah, like does processing go up when you enable MDS versus not?
Yeah, so the basic principle of MDS is to try and give you the same page, right? And in fact, like all the rendered chunks are basically the same. The array of scripts and styles is all basically the same. The difference that we see from MDS to non-MDS is sometimes you have to request the master page wireframe, and that is an extra SQL round trip when you request that, or I think maybe two. We cache that to try and allay that as much as possible, but that's where we've seen the significant difference, where it is significant. Okay. Other questions, please?
Yeah. The bulk of the performance problems that we're having now, it's IE8, SP10. It's all about pure JavaScript execution time. That's where most of the complaints we're getting are.
Yeah,
now.
absolutely.
I'm still going to be on IE8 for years.
Right.
What is my expected experience going to be in 2013? Is this going to be better? Is it going to be worse?
Oh, no, it should be better, right? I mean, because we began this release using IE8, and then we went to IE9, and I don't remember if I think IE8 was a supported browser, right? Yeah, so everything that I talked about today is completely tested and blessed in IE8 and IE9, Chrome, Firefox.
Yeah. The reason I ask is our current experience, IE8 versus other browsers, is a factor of 20.
Is what?
A factor of 20.
A backwards 20?
A factor of 20 times worse.
A factor of 20? Really? Well, we should talk.
I'm happy to talk. I will get you.
And I'm happy to talk, by the way, at length with people after this, for anybody that has hairy questions kind of like that one. Anything else? Yes, please.
So did I understand correctly that this works primarily with the team sites, not with publishing sites? Does that depend on whether it's anonymous access versus authenticated access or collaboration versus read-only?
No, that, to my knowledge, doesn't matter at all, right? I mean, you've seen some of the sites, like the site that I went to, I mean, just used it. We only trigger, like there's basically one property on the SP Web object that says, is this enabled? And if that thing is on, then we just do it, right? And the publishing feature comes with a little bit that turns that off, right? And so they did that intentionally so they wouldn't have to deal with some of the difficult integration costs. But, I mean, certainly for anything, you can always turn it on. Whether they support it or not is a different question.
So if we do turn it on the publishing pages, will it work?
I haven't tried it. And I know that they have tried it, and I certainly can't make a guarantee there. They don't support it, I can tell you that much.
Okay.
But you can try it. Try it. Hey. Okay, go ahead.
What happens if you have users...
Whoa. Sorry, somebody was interrupted. Go ahead.
What happens if you have users who are putting script blocks or CSS directly on the page through like the content editor? Will this work in that scenario?
What do we do there? So to give props where props are due, the people that I was very involved in the design of this, the people who really implemented Petru, Aditi, and Arye, really, Petru would be able to answer that question in depth. He is such a thorough, incredibly brilliant developer. I am sure he has thought about this. I don't know what the answer is.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah.
So you said that with the publishing features turned on, then this is turned off.
Yes.
Is it the infrastructure site collection level publishing features that turns that off, or is it the site level publishing feature that turns it off?
I don't know. I think it's the site level.
Okay.
I don't think it's the publishing
Infrastructure.
Yeah, I know which one you're talking about. I don't think it's that, but I'm not 100% positive. No, in fact, because the bit is at the site level.
Okay.
So it's almost certainly at the site level feature.
Excellent. Thanks.
Yeah. Okay.
So when reviewing the demo, I could see that one thing was really missed from that. Most of the users are accessing the sites via the proxy, and proxy is doing caching. What would be the impact of caching? Can it serve, for example, like a content delivery network on premise? Because at the end, scripts and layouts are not changed frequently.
Right. So we didn't, like I said, the big scenario that we tested for CDN was the internet scenario, right? For SharePoint Online, that was actually the thing that drove the whole feature. And it was sort of a late-breaking thought that, hey, our on-prem customers want this. You know, can we give it to them? We tried. So before me coming here, we had never tried to set up like an on-prem CDN for like distributed offices. And that's the sort of stuff we have to try before we can tell you that we can do it. Did I answer your question?
So not actually.
Okay.
I was talking about the caching proxy. Most of the users and most of the guys here are accessing their SharePoint sites, perhaps via the caching proxy. So they can benefit from the server, which stands almost next to their network, and which is capable of delivering the JavaScript we are taking from layouts.
Great. So the CDN shouldn't affect that, right? I mean, if you can cache something from the SharePoint farm, you can cache something from the CDN, right? And that's even closer than the CDN is, correct?
So can we still rely on the proxy that the policy for the JavaScript file will allow it to be cached?
So we serve up our JavaScript with basically the identical headers that we do from the farm. Like on the CDN, it's identical to the farm. The only difference is there's this like allow cross-domain access. There's an extra header that we do so that some of the complications with being on two separate domains don't cause errors.
So does this mean that JavaScript has the same caching headers as ASPX?
Yeah, I mean every JavaScript and every CSS file and all the files generally in layouts that we want to be anonymous all have the same set of headers which basically say cache this thing for a year.
Okay,
and that's true at the CDN level as well as at the farm.
Thank you.
Sure. Go ahead.
Hi, sorry, I'm a little new to this, so I'm a little confused by the CDN because you had said, when you're looking for a script, you should use the relative link, which makes sense, but then when you were putting in the references to the CDN, that looked like an absolute link, so I'm just a little confused how that works.
Okay, so there's a difference between when you register the script and when the script is actually rendered in the HTML source.
Okay.
Right? So when you register the script, you should, if it's a layout script, you should always register it just by name.
Okay.
Right? And then the script link, when it renders the head, I should go back to this.
Please.
Back to this slide. Yeah. I have this tendency to want to sort of point things out in my mind, in the air. Sorry for the delay. There we go. Okay, so this is the rendered HTML. This is the stuff that comes over the network. Okay. But the code will actually say just register just init.js. Okay. Or initstrings.js. But when the script link renders the actual page, it puts this, and that's how the browser knows where to get the files.
Okay, so the previous slide, so this is where the browser knows, and this is where...
So this is what the server renders if the CDN is disabled.
Okay.
And if the CDN is enabled, then it renders the same array of scripts, except it gets them from the CDN.
Okay, and even though that's an absolute link, that's still faster?
It is faster because it's coming from a server which is closer to your users.
Okay.
Yeah.
That was the question. Thank you.
No problem. Any other questions? I thank you all for being here, and like I said, I'm happy to sit around and chat with anybody about hairy issues or whatever.